give you some time. Don't type anything in the chat that could be confidential, as it will get recorded as well. You will give you the opportunity to unmute and ask your question. You can type questions that are general in the chat, and then we'll read that off. So today, we are going to talk about SSI eligibility and appeal. Before we get started, let me just share a little bit about our agency and introduce our presenter for tonight. We were formerly known as Protection and Advocacy. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 1978. We're federally mandated to provide legal services for people with disabilities. Issues that we work on can be anything from special education, public benefit, regional center services, housing, employment, and so forth. We have offices located in Sacramento, Los Angeles, Bay Area, and San Diego. We also have smaller offices in the Fresno, Ontario, and Modesto. Today's presenter will be Daniel Hernandez. He is our legal clinic attorney with the Advocacy Community Engagement Group at Disability Rights, California. He was born in Santa Ana, California, to a Mexican immigrant parent. He began practicing law in 2021. He has experience in immigration, housing, and some public benefit matters. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you for that introduction, Lonnie. And we'll first launch the presentation so everybody can see it on the screen. There we go. Thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Daniel Hernandez, and today we will be talking about SSI, or Supplemental Security Income. And for the duration of the presentation, I will be referring to it as SSI. You can go to the next slide. And of course, Lonnie provided a great introduction about our organization, DRC, but you will receive a copy of this presentation at the end, so you can also read a little bit more about what we generally can help with. A lot of issues, but we have a list of issues that we can help with, and you see a list of that here, which you can refer to at a later time. You can go to the next slide. Okay, and just a disclaimer that we like to give at every presentation. So the following presentation is meant for education only and doesn't constitute legal advice nor counsel. And that's because your situation may be unique and require careful attention. So at the end, we will provide our intake line number so that you can call should you want additional help, not just with SSI or SSDI, but other matters that are related to disability. And also keep in mind that the information in these slides could become out of date. And that's because the laws and local practices relating to these matters are constantly developing. And saying that, I do want to point out that there are going to be important changes to SSI in September of this year. So this presentation doesn't currently reflect that. However, throughout the presentation, I will point out where those changes will be made, just for your reference. And again, these changes will take effect on September 30th, 2024. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And here on this slide, we have, let's say, a table of contents, right? An overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So we'll first discuss what Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, is generally. We'll also discuss the eligibility requirements for SSI. We'll talk about what's considered income under the SSI program, and also what's considered a resource or resources under the SSI program. Also, if there's information that you need to report to SSI, right, we'll discuss that, what exactly needs to be reported. And lastly, we'll talk about SSI overpayments, appeals as well. So that's also important information to consider. Okay, let's go to the first substantive slide, please. Okay, so some of you may or may not be familiar with the SSI program, but there are maximum amounts in SSI benefit payments that can be given to a person in any given year. And here, of course, we're only talking about California. Every state will have a different maximum amount. So in other words, right, when someone is eligible for SSI benefits, there's a maximum amount of money that can be received, depending on the person's living situation. And you can receive less than the maximum amount, but you can't receive more. And here we have two examples, right? Three technically, right? So for a single adult that lives independently, that maximum amount is $1,182.94 in 2024, right? And something to point out, right, that this maximum amount can be a bit higher for someone who is blind, an adult who is blind, and that amount is $1,267 or so. So it's a little bit higher. Now, for a single adult that's living in the household of someone else, for example, in the home of their parents, right, if they're adults, that maximum amount is $873.87. And now for a disabled minor child, the maximum amount is $1,040.27. And again, this is in California, because every state will have a different maximum amount. And California, I believe, probably Hawaii may have the highest, but it has one of the highest maximum amounts because, of course, in California, there's a higher cost of living. And something else to point out is that every year, because of the cost of living, this amount increases a little bit. And it's understood, right, that even with these small increases, it's difficult for people to get by on just SSI. And many advocates, attorneys are very well aware of that. And here we have a link to a Social Security publication that provides all the maximum amounts in California, depending on your living situation. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So the question is, who is eligible for SSI or supplemental security income? Well, adults can qualify, right? If the following can be established or demonstrated, right? The adult has to be over 65 years of age or older. The adult has to be blind, or the adult must have a qualifying disability. And later we'll explain what a qualifying disability can be. But that's one requirement for adults. Another one is that the adult must have limited income and resources. And we'll also get into that a little bit later in this presentation. So that's adults. Now we have children as well. Children can qualify for SSI or be eligible for SSI. And of course, in order for a child to be eligible, they have to be under 18 years of age, naturally, with a qualifying disability. And their household must have limited income and resources. And we'll also talk about that a little bit later. So that's something to keep in mind, that adults and children are evaluated differently under the SSI program. And in later slides, we'll delve a little deeper into that. Okay, so can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay. So qualifying disability, we mentioned that earlier. And what I would note is that qualifying disability is different for children than it is for adults under the SSI program. So a child is considered to have a qualifying disability if they have, and I'll read from the slide, a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which results in marked and severe functional limitations and which can be expected to result in death, or which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. And that's a mouthful. And all that means, right, is that a child can have a qualifying disability if they have a physical or mental condition that significantly limits their functions. And some functions to think about are like breathing, speaking, concentrating, thinking, walking, learning, and other basic functions, right? If the condition significantly limits those functions, it may be a qualifying disability. And of course, the other part of that is that the condition must be expected to last or has lasted for a year or so, or is likely to result in death. So in practice, it means that children have to show that they meet the listing of impairments or medically or functionally equal to the listings. And so Social Security has a list of what these qualifying disabilities are, and they're called the Blue Book listings. And here we have a link to what that listing looks like for children, right? Because it's different for children than it is for adults. So you can visit this link. And I'm gonna see, I know Lonnie doesn't. Let me put it in the chat for all of you if you want to look at it in real time, but that's what it looks like. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so that's children, right? That's a qualifying disability for children. Now let's talk about adults. So for adults, the definition is different. So for adults, right, a person, in order to have a qualifying disability, it has to be demonstrated that the person is unable to engage in substantial gainful activity, otherwise known by its acronym SGA, due to a medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which is expected to last 12 months or longer or result in death. Right, so much like children, right, we've discussed that there has to be a physical or mental condition that substantially limits human functions for at least a year, or is a condition that is expected to result in death. There's something new here, though, something called substantial gainful activity, or SGA. So what does that mean? So SGA is mental or physical work that is done to earn a certain amount of money each month. That's what that is. So if a person can earn more than this certain amount, they would not be eligible for SSI benefits. And every year this amount changes because, of course, the cost of living. So in 2024, this amount for a blind person, the SGA amount is $2,590. And for a person who is not blind, that amount is $1,550. So something to consider, right? SGA, substantial gainful activity. That's something having to do with the ability to work. So the test is not whether a person would be hired, right? For an entry-level job, let's say. Instead, the test is whether, if that person was hired, whether they could keep the job. And that's something important to remember. And there's, of course, different what we call work incentives for people who are under SSI, which we won't cover during this presentation. But just the important thing to take away from this is that for adults, substantial gainful activity is the marker, right, to determine if a person is disabled under the SSI program. And here we have a list of qualifying conditions, right? Much like there is one for children, there's also listings for adults. And I'll also put this link in the chat for any of you who are interested in taking a look at it in real time. And then we can go to the next slide. Oh, and something I should have let everybody know is that throughout the presentation, we're going to have questions that we'll pose to the audience. And feel free to type the correct answer choice, whether A, B, C, D, in the chat. And we'll go through it together. So the first question is, we have Camila. So Camila's 32 years of age and has cerebral palsy. And this is considered a neurological condition. So Camila has had the financial support of her mother for the majority of her life. However, recently, Camila has moved out on her own, and she no longer has the financial support of her mother because she wants to be independent. So Camila wants to know if her condition qualifies her to receive SSI benefits.
Yes.
So the question is Camila's condition?
Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. Thank you. I love that. I love when people answer. So is Camila's condition a qualifying disability under Social Security? And you have a 50% chance of getting this right. So either yes or no, and somebody may have already called out the correct answer. So we'll give it a few moments. Feel free to type A or B or yes or no in the chat. And we'll give it a few seconds, and then we'll go over this together. Great. Thank you, everybody, for answering in the chat. Give it a few more moments and then we'll proceed. Great, great, great. 100% of you are answering this correctly. If we can go to the next slide. Yes, okay. So the correct answer here is yes. So we'll go through this together. Although we're pretty sure that the answer is yes, right? We want to confirm that. So let's go through a few steps. So let's first ask ourselves, what listing do we use here? Do we use a listing for children or adults? Of course, here, because Camila's 32 years of age, we're going to use the adult listing. So we're also told that Camila's disability is cerebral palsy, and we're told that it's a neurological condition. So if we can go to the next slide. So of course, if you visit those links that we put in the chat, the listings, this is what the listing looks like when you look at it. So we see a category here or a section here for neurological disorders. It's listing 11. So then we would go to that section. So we can go to the next slide, please. And now let's look to see if the disability is listed. And here we see it listed, right? We see cerebral palsy is listed under subsection 11.07. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So if we go to that subsection or listing, we now see what Social Security, the requisites, right? Or the criteria that Social Security uses to determine if it's a qualifying disability. And we won't go through it here, but it's just an example, right? That for some qualifying disabilities, it can be quite straightforward. But that's not to say if your condition or disability is not listed here, that you don't qualify. Rather, there's more broad listings, right, where a condition may qualify, although it's not listed, maybe because it's so rare or not many people have this condition or disability that it requires a little bit more analysis. But this is an example that we use with in Camila's case. Let's go to the next slide. So to remind everyone, right, the basic eligibility requirements to get SSI benefits based on disability are that 1, there has to be a qualifying disability, and 2, the person must have limited income and resources. So in the next few slides, we're going to discuss that a bit more. We'll first start by going over income, though. And so the question is, what is income? So there are different types of income that Social Security considers under the SSI program, and it includes the following. We have a list here. We have earned income. We have unearned income. We have in-kind income, also sometimes known as in-kind support and maintenance. And then we also have deemed income. And in the next few slides, we're going to go a little bit deeper into what each of those means. Okay. So we'll first start with earned income. And this may be self-explanatory, right? So these are wages or money that someone gets for working, or earnings from self-employment if somebody is self-employed. We also have unearned income, and this is money that is self-explanatory, not earned, right? This is money that's not earned. So it could be Social Security benefits, right? Because you don't work to obtain them. It can also be a pension. Although you may have worked at one point to receive your pension, it's not a wage earning. Also, state disability payments are not earned. Unemployment benefits are not earned. And sometimes people give you money, right? Or the value of things, right, that can be converted into money. So that would also be unearned income. And the next one we have is in-kind income. So this is food or shelter that's received for free or less than fair market value. And let's provide an example of that. So let's say that I'm an adult and I live with I am an adult. And let's say I live with my parents. And I'm a person with a disability. Let's say that I'm living with my parents and they're paying for my food, and I don't pay for rent, right? They own the home, so they don't ask me to pay rent, so I don't pay any rent. that's considered in-kind income that I'm receiving. Since I'm essentially receiving the value of food and shelter for free, right? My parents are just giving it to me. So that's in-kind income. But I will say, remember those important changes that I mentioned earlier in the presentation? This in-kind income will be looking differently starting September 30th, 2024. So under the SSI program, as of September 30th, 2024, food will no longer be counted as income. So that's not going to factor, right? So if somebody gives you the value of food or food, that's not going to be considered income, which is great for a lot of individuals. We also, at the end of the list here, we have deemed income. So this is income from a spouse or parents. And for parents, right, that's in situations where their child is receiving SSI benefits. So if I'm an adult with a disability and I'm married to someone that works for money, that has wage earnings, then the money of my spouse will be attributed to me and my household. The same goes for children with their parents, right? The parent's income is also considered as part of the child's household. So that's deemed income. When somebody else's income is attributed to the person receiving SSI. Okay. So now is the next question. And of course, feel free to say it out loud or put it in the chat. But now that we've talked about earned income, unearned income, in-kind income, and deemed income, we're going to have to figure out what Jose's situation is, right? So Jose is a person with a disability, and Social Security Administration has determined that Jose has a qualifying disability. Great. Jose is 23 years old and lives with his parents. He pays his parents rent every month, and his parents do not give him any money. Jose has a part-time job at a department store, and he makes about $700 every month. So what type of income does Jose have here? Feel free to... Yes, we'll give it a few moments. And while everybody's answering, I did see a question in the chat about fair share payments by adult children. We'll also talk about that in a later slide, because there is a change to that as well. Great, thank you, everybody. Yeah, everybody, if we can go to the next slide. Yep, everybody knocking it out of the park, right? Everybody's correct. Earned income is triggered here, right? Because based on the information we're given, we know that Jose has earned income because he has wages or earnings for working. So A is a correct answer here. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Another question. Now, Lydia. We're talking about Lydia's situation. So Lydia is a person with a disability, and Social Security has determined that Lydia has a qualifying disability. Lydia is 17 years old and lives with her mother. Lydia also lives with two other siblings who are 5 and 10 years old. Those siblings do not have a disability, and they don't get Social Security benefits. Lydia's mother works at a hospital and makes about $3,000 a month. And Lydia's a full-time student. She's in high school. So what type of income does Lydia have? Rita, put it in the chat. Great, knocking it out of the park again. Everybody's answering correctly. I think we can go to the next slide, Lonnie. The correct answer is D, deemed income. So based on this information we're given, we know Lydia is 17 years old. She's a minor or a child, and Lydia does not have a job, so she doesn't have any earned income. However, her mother does have a job and is making money, and they're part of the same household. This means that the mother's income is attributed to Lydia's household. So there's deemed income here, and D is the correct answer. Good job. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So now the question is resources, right? We talked about income. Now let's talk about resources. So resources include can include the following: cash, checking account, savings account, land, vehicles, life insurance, anything that can be converted into money, right? Things with value, or things that can be converted into money. And if some of you are familiar with the SSI program, you'll know that there's limits on how many resources or the amount of resources that someone may have. And we did mention that resources should be limited, right? So what is that limit? So for an adult individual, that limit is $2,000. And for a couple, let's say two individuals that are receiving SSI, that amount is $3,000. And I should make a note here that that amount has not changed since the 1980s, I believe. So, and I know a lot of advocates, right? A lot of individuals are working hard to make a change because that's very little in resources, and that limit is quite restrictive. But of course, people can also use other resources like CalAble accounts, which we won't cover here today, but it's something that you should consider if resources are an issue, right, when it comes to being eligible for SSI. So something that I didn't list here are children, right? What is the resource limit for children that receive SSI? It's a bit different, and it'll depend on what the family situation is, whether they live with one parent or both parents. And one common example that we'll use, right? So if you have a child receiving SSI and there are two parents living in the home, and let's say the parents don't receive SSI benefits, they're not parents with disabilities, this means that the limit can be $3,000 for the parents or a couple, right? Plus $2,000 for the individual child. So in total, that's $5,000. So let's say that you have a child receiving SSI benefits, living with two parents, right? It's just them. Then that limit altogether would be $5,000, right? $3,000 for the two parents, and then $2,000 for the child. So $5,000 in total. So, of course, we all have resources, right, throughout the month. So whatever's left over as of the beginning of the following month counts as a resource. And this is known as the first of the month rule. We call it the FOM rule. So in other words, right, how many resources a person has is determined at the first moment of the month. Let's say that I'm single. I'm a single adult person that receives SSI. Let's say that I win $6,000, not 6,000, let's say $600 in the lotto scratchers, right? And I receive it, let's say June 10th, 2024, which was yesterday. If I use that money to pay credit cards, or to pay for food, right? Anything like that. And let's say that by July 1st of 2024, if I no longer have that money, it won't be considered a resource by Social Security. So resources are determined at the first moment of the month. So in theory, right, I can have $5,000 right now as an SSI beneficiary, but let's say I use it to buy things that I need. If I have less than $2,000 by July 1st, 2024, then I'm not exceeding the limit. I'm okay. So first of the month, that's when resources are calculated. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So resource exemptions. So there are some things that will not be considered a resource, right? A countable resource by Social Security. And that's important. So this can include the home that a person lives in. It can include household furnishings like furniture, a fridge, a washing machine, personal effects such as a wedding or engagement ring, one car used for transportation, certain trusts like special needs trusts. So Social Security doesn't count retirement accounts either that are owned by a spouse or a person with a disability or the parent of a child with a disability. So let's say I have a retirement account that I contribute to every month. Let's say the total value of that is $100,000. That amount is not considered a resource, right? This is because I can't access some money until I retire. However, let's say I take a loan from that account. Sometimes you can do that with 401ks, for example. Then that amount could be considered a resource, right? Because at that point, I have access to it. So it can be considered a resource. Also, something that we would like to point out is that Social Security doesn't count the first $100,000 in a CalAble account. So CalAble accounts are great tools that people with SSI can use to make sure that they are below the resource limit. So if a person opens a CalAble account, they can put money in that account, and that money won't be considered a resource. And you can use the money to pay several things, such as rent, food, and other things, really. And though it's free, there are some requirements that have to be met to open this account, a CalAble account. The main requirement is that the person must have developed a disability before turning 26 years old. But I believe beginning in 2026, that age will increase to 46 years old. So CalAble accounts, look into them. They're quite a powerful tool. They're investment accounts that people with disabilities on SSI can use, right? So that they never go over that resource limit, because it's quite restrictive at $2,000. We can go to the next slide. Okay, we have another question. 4 answer choices this time. So this is pertaining to Jacob. So Jacob is 37 years old and is a person with a disability. Social Security has determined that Jacob has a qualifying disability. Okay. Social Security has also determined that Jacob has limited income. Jacob lives alone in a mobile home that he owns that's worth about $150,000. Jacob also has a car that is worth $5,000. On the first moment of the month, Jacob also has $500 in his checking account and $500 in his savings account. So it's going to require some math, right? But what is the value of countable resources that Jacob possesses? Give it a few moments, because this requires some actual calculation, maybe, or not. Great, great. Oh, there's varied answers. Great. Okay, give it a few more moments. Awesome. I think we can go to the next slide. And the correct answer is $1,000. Remember, we spoke about resource exemptions or exclusions. So there are resources that will not be considered resources by Social Security. For example, one car, right, and one home that someone lives in. Here, the mobile home is considered a home. So it won't be considered a resource because Jacob lives in it. And there's no information that he has another home. If he had another home, that other home would be considered a resource. But he has one home and he's living in it, so it's excluded. Also, Jacob has one car, so it won't be considered a resource, right? It's his primary form of transportation, so it's excluded. If he had a second car by any chance, right, that he also uses, that may be considered a resource. So the only things that will be considered a resource are the $500 in the savings account and the $500 in the checking account. And that's a total of $1,000. So the correct answer here is C. Okay. Can go to the next slide. Another thing about the SSI program is that information has to be updated and reported regularly, right? So for children, the parents' pay stubs must be submitted to Social Security Administration by the 10th of each month. And that sounds a little bit cumbersome, right? You have to provide this information every month. But now they've also used, there's like mobile applications on the phone that you can use to submit this information. So things, because of technology, things have become easier to report. And also for adults that are working, right, pay stubs also have to be submitted to Social Security. And if that's the case, right, if you're a person on SSI, don't provide originals, right? You're not required to provide originals. Submit a copy. That's perfectly fine. And if you're submitting these copies of pay stubs in person, always ask for a receipt or have them stamp, right? Another copy that you may have when you submit it. Okay, go to the next slide. So other things that have to be reported, right, is if you ever move, you have a new address, that has to be reported. If you're a person that's working, you have to let Social Security know when you start or stop working. If there's any change in income, let's say you received a pay raise, that'll be reflected in your pay stubs, but it's important to report that, especially if you get another job, for example. And also if you come across resources. And a common thing that we see is that sometimes people will be in a car accident, right? So there's like a personal injury lawsuit and there's settlement money. Sometimes people forget to report that. And it's important to report it because it affects the resource limit, right? So if you do get more than $2,000 in settlement money and you still have it at the first of the month, that may make you ineligible for SSI. So it's always important to remember to report these things. And about that, let's say you do get some money. If you have a CalAble account, you can put it in there, right? Otherwise, you would have to spend it down within the month in order for it not to qualify as a resource. And here we have a link to a Social Security publication that gives you more information about this. Okay, can go to the next slide. So we talked about in-kind income, right? And also sometimes known as in-kind support and maintenance, which the acronym is ISM. So ISM is unearned income that is not cash and it's not a check, right? So in-kind support and maintenance, or ISM, that's received or acquired when someone else pays for or provides food and or shelter to the person receiving SSI. And if you have this type of income, right, or ISM, it can cause a reduction in monthly SSI benefits. Oh, and somebody has a comment in the chat, which I'll just address right now. So all this presentation is going to be provided to participants. It's going to be shared with the coordinators, and then this should be provided to you, and it'll have all the links. Okay, so as I was saying, right, so we have a publication, right? DRC has a publication that you can refer to that talks a little bit more about in-kind support and maintenance. But as a reminder, right, as of September 30th, 2024, the value of food that you receive from another person will not be considered income or in-kind support and maintenance. So as of September 30th, 2024 of this year, food will no longer be considered under in-kind support and maintenance. So that's an important change that we want the audience and participants to make note of. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So why is it important to know about in-kind support and maintenance? This is because it can cause a reduced amount in SSI payments to some people, right? The common example are children receiving SSI that turn 18, right? So at 18, you're considered an adult. So if your parents are paying for your food and shelter, at that point, it's as if they're giving it to you for free. And this can reduce the amount of SSI benefits generally, right? And also income, both earned and unearned, is used by Social Security to decide the amount of your SSI monthly benefit amount. So the amount of SSI benefits you get for the month. So the more earned or unearned income a person receives, the less the SSI monthly benefit amount will be. But remember, right, as of September 30th, 2024, the value of food will no longer be considered income for Social Security purposes. Under the SSI program, I should say. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So how do you avoid these reductions? So I will mention the information on this slide is accurate as of today and until September 29th, 2024. But when September 30th, 2024 comes around, there will be a change, particularly on how rent is considered under the SSI program. And at the end of this slide, I will explain how the information will change, but let's just proceed. So right now, right, an SSI recipient has to pay their pro rata share of cost. This means that a person has to pay their fair share of shelter and pay for their own food. And so there's a formula, right, that is used by Social Security right now to determine what that would be. So you would add the monthly food and shelter expenses and then divide it by the number of people living in the home or the household. So we'll use an example. Let's say that I live in a home with a roommate and we rent a tiny 1-bedroom apartment for $1,000. That includes gas, electricity, and water. So the fair share for shelter is $500, right? Also, my roommate and I do not share food and I pay for all my food expenses. So $500 would be considered the fair share. And shelter can include the following, right? It includes rent, mortgage payments, property taxes, property insurance that has to be paid, repairs to the home, gas, water, electricity, garbage fees. It doesn't include phone bill, the phone bill or the internet bill. That wouldn't be considered. Also, food doesn't include paper products, so pet food. That's excluded from the definition of food. Okay, so now let's talk about this change to rent, how rent is considered under the SSI program starting September 30th, 2024. So currently, if a person doesn't pay for their fair share of rent or the market value of rent, then their SSI benefits can be reduced because you can say that that person is getting some value of rent for free. However, starting September 30th, 2024, that's going to change. And at that point, a person can pay at least $334.33 in rent without their benefits being reduced. So let's say in the case where the pro rata share or the fair share was $500. In that case, if I paid at least $334.33 in rent, then it wouldn't affect me. And you might be asking yourself, $334.33, that is such a specific amount. And this amount is specific because it's known as a presumed maximum value, which is there's a formula for that. So it's actually the full federal benefit rate divided by 3. And every year this amount will increase a little bit, but in 2024, that amount is $334.33. And that's so helpful to a lot of SSI recipients because a lot of people live in cities where rent is very expensive. And so sometimes it's difficult to live off your SSI benefits, right? But let's say you're living in a home and you rent a room and you're in an arrangement where because your income stream or the money that you receive each month is very limited, they'll allow you to rent the room for less than the fair market rate. As long as you pay $334.33 in rent each month, it would not reduce your SSI benefit amount, which is an amazing support for a lot of people that encounter that issue. Okay, so we can go to the next slide where we have a question, and then and also I want to know at the end of the presentation, we'll definitely answer all the questions that are in the chat. Okay. So this is a pro rata share of costs question, but again, this is a question that reflects what the SSI rules and policies are today, right? but that'll change September 30th, 2024. So Daniel is 28 years of age, and he is a person with a disability. Daniel receives SSI benefits because he has a qualifying disability. He has limited income, and he has limited resources. In 2024, Daniel is receiving $1,182.94 each month. Because his rent is increasing, Daniel has had to move out of his apartment. He has now moved in with his friend Jacob, who owns a mobile home. Rent for the mobile home space is $1,200 a month. Gas, water, and electricity bills are about $200 every month. So we can say that rent is $1,400 a month, right? So Daniel and Jacob have their own room and they pay for their own food. So what is Daniel's pro rata share of cost? And feel free to put your answer in the chat. Give it a few moments. Great, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Great. So everybody's correct. C is the correct answer here. So here we know that there are two people living in the mobile home. Rent is $1,200 a month and utilities are $200 a month. So let's say the total is $1,400 a month. Since there are two people, we divide $1,400 by 2. This leaves $700. So $700 is a pro rata share of cost for Daniel, or the fair share amount that he's supposed to pay. So the correct answer here is C. Good job. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so the question is, if Daniel pays less than $700 for his pro rata share of costs, what can happen to his SSI benefits? Pre-September 30th, 2024. And then it might take you a bit because the answers are a little bit longer. We'll give it a few moments. Great, great. Awesome. Can we go to the next slide, please? All of you, wow. Answering every single question correctly. Amazing job. So the correct answer here is B. So here, if Daniel is not paying the pro rata or fair share of expenses, right, then his benefits could be reduced. And this is because Social Security will consider that Daniel is receiving in-kind income, or the value of food and shelter for free that he's not paying for. So this is why the correct answer is B. But again, though, right, as a reminder, this is the correct answer today, right? But if Daniel is paying at least $334.33 for rent, including utilities, after September 30th, 2024, then his SSI benefits will not be reduced. Great. Okay, can go to the next slide. So let's talk about parent deeming. Some of us are parents, right, with children with disabilities who may be eligible for SSI or are currently receiving SSI. So part of the parent's income and resources count against the child in determining whether or not the child is eligible for SSI or they're continuing to be eligible. So as we stated before, Social Security considers the parent's income, but not all of the parent's income is considered. And we won't go over the formula today, but usually and in most cases, only half of the parent's income is considered. And here we're providing a link to a publication with more information, right? That DRC has drafted and created and developed. That gives you more information about what this formula is for deeming income. Also, parent deeming does not count as income, right? So income received, let me rephrase that. So there's income that a parent may receive that doesn't count as income under the Social Security or SSI program. And a good example of this are, let's say you have a parent who's an IHSS provider. A parent has, in that case, right, the IHSS payments will not be considered income if you're taking care of a minor child who's living in the home with you. So that's important to consider. That's not considered income. And okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so how are SSI benefit payments every month calculated? For income under the SSI program, the income received in 1 month determines the amount of SSI benefits 2 months later, right? And usually this is a bit more of a concern, excuse me, a bit more of a concern for people who don't receive a consistent amount in pay every month, because the more you make, of course, the more risk that you have that SSI benefits will be reduced, especially for parents. Also, here we have an example, right? So income that's received in August determines a monthly benefit amount for October. And that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So how does working affect monthly SSI? So in some situations, right, some adults can work and still receive SSI as long as they don't go over that substantial gainful activity limit that we previously discussed. And the thing is, right, that Social Security wants people to work, right, or to test their ability to work. And so that's why if a person works, right, it doesn't automatically disqualify them from receiving SSI. As long as they don't exceed that substantial gainful activity limit, they're okay. They'll continue to be eligible. Their benefits may be reduced, but they may be eligible. But if someone does work, of course, that person has to report their wages every month. And again, I mentioned previously that there are what they call work incentives. So there's programs, right, under Social Security that encourage and support people that receive SSI to work. For example, one of those programs is called Ticket to Work, which provides support to people that want to work, right? It gives them the tools and ability to save resources, right, in order to reach like a work goal. And here we have a publication for that, if anybody's interested. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So the question is, what are overpayments, right? I know some people that may be familiar with SSI may have received an overpayment in the past. So an SSI overpayment is a payment that is made by Social Security that was more than the amount actually due. So sometimes Social Security will review bank information and discover that you had more resources than you were supposed to. Let's say you got a settlement check and you put it in your bank, but didn't report it to Social Security. So in that case, right, Social Security will see that after the fact, many months after, and they'll tell a person, I see here that you had more than $2,000, let's say in June 2024. This means that you were not eligible for SSI benefits on that month. So you owe us that money that we paid you. You owe that money to us. That's an overpayment. And so the amount of the overpayment is the difference between the SSI amount that is received and the amount that Social Security should have said you should have been received, the accurate or correct amount. And of course, this can cause a person that is over income or resource limits to get overpayments. And usually what happens if there's an overpayment, you always have to get a notice in writing from Social Security explaining what the overpayment amount is and why an overpayment was issued. And it'll also tell you about your rights, right, that you can appeal. And here we have a DRC publication that you can refer to that gives you more information about overpayments. Okay, we can go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about overpayments. Okay, So when a person is over income or resource limits and that amount has gone below the allowable limits, then a person's SSI benefits may be suspended, which is not always a great thing, right? Especially if you're depending on these disability benefits to live. So if benefits are suspended because a person is over income or is over the resource limits, a person generally has 12 months after the suspension to have their benefits reinstated without having to reapply for SSI benefits again. So as an example, let's say I received a settlement check, let's say $20,000. Social Security catches wind of this, they figure that out. They know I'm no longer eligible for SSI because I'm exceeding $2,000. I don't have a Cal Label account, right? There's no way I can get around it. Social Security will say, Daniel, you're no longer eligible for SSI benefits. So they'll suspend my benefits. I'll no longer be receiving the monthly benefit checks or payments. I have 12 months from when my benefits are suspended to reduce the amount of resources that I have. I need to reduce those $20,000 to less than $2,000. If I can do that within 12 months, I can simply go back to Social Security and let them know, look, my resources are under the $2,000 limit now. Can you reinstate my benefits? And they will, right? But if I exceed those 12 months, my SSI claim will automatically close, meaning I have to apply from the very beginning again. So that's something important to remember, that if that happens, you have 12 months, generally 12 months to have your benefits reinstated, your SSI benefits. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So let's say there is an overpayment, right? How do you respond to that? What can you do? You can appeal, right? So if the overpayment is wrong, meaning that Social Security is outright incorrect when they determine that you were overpaid, you can appeal. Generally, a person has 60 days to appeal. Technically 65 days because Social Security presumes that it takes 5 days for a person to receive letters in the mail. But a person should appeal as soon as possible. And the rule was that a person should appeal 10 days of receiving the notice of the suspension or the overpayment to prevent a reduction in SSI payment amounts or a suspension. Right now, there's an exception to this rule, which some people, a lot of Social Security representatives, surprisingly enough, are not aware, or they should be aware, but maybe they're not as informed. So right here at the very bottom, you see a note, right, that due to a recent settlement agreement from a federal case from New York, Social Security currently has a policy that allows some people receiving SSI benefits to appeal within 60 days to prevent a reduction or a termination in their SSI benefits, which is helpful. Before, it generally was 10 days, right, that a person had. But now that's been extended to 60 days, where if you appeal, you can continue to receive your benefits, or you can request that they continue. So when you appeal, you use a specific form that's called a reconsideration or request for reconsideration. And when you submit that, right, you can submit it online, or it's an actual hard copy that you can fill out and turn into the Social Security office. If you have proof and you can explain why the overpayment is wrong, that's important. So yes, so that's an appeal. But if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about a waiver. A waiver is different, a waiver of overpayment. Let's say that, okay, maybe a person was overpaid, right? But you feel that it wasn't your fault. For example, let's say that you submitted your wages every month, but Social Security lost the pay stubs or doesn't have record of the pay stubs. Remember, I stated that it's important to have a receipt or a copy that you submitted those pay stubs. It comes in handy in situations like this. So this means that the overpayment was not your fault, right? Because you reported everything, but Social Security lost it or doesn't have record of it. So you can ask for what's known as a waiver. A waiver is a recognition that you really do have an overpayment, but it's not your fault. And you have to show a few things. You have to show that the overpayment, of course, was not your fault, and that it would be financially difficult for you to pay the money back or to repay it, or that it's against equity and good conscience, meaning that it's unfair. And there's no time limit for requesting a waiver. You can ask for a waiver at any time. Unlike an appeal where you have 60 days, a waiver, you can submit that at any time. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So another question, right? Daniel's situation. And this is about what should Daniel do? Appeal or submit a waiver? Okay. So Daniel was in a car accident and he received $100,000 in settlement money after he hired and paid an attorney. Daniel's car was totaled. The day after receiving did I say 100,000? I meant $10,000. $100,000. So the day after receiving the $10,000 in settlement money, Daniel bought another car for $9,500. 10 months later, Social Security Administration discovers that Daniel got $10,000 in settlement money. Social Security states that he's over the resource limit, which is $2,000. So they suspend his benefits. They also send him a notice that he was overpaid for 10 months. They tell him, you owe us all that money we gave you in those 10 months, you have to pay it back. So what can Daniel do in this situation? And this might require a little bit more time to figure out. So we're gonna give people a few moments. Wow, everybody's on top of it. Great, we'll give it a few more moments. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. B would be the correct answer here. Remember that if the overpayment was correct, but it was not your fault, then a waiver may be appropriate. That's not the case here, right? Here, it's clear that Social Security failed to take into consideration that Daniel bought a new car for $9,500, which was the only car that he had, right? So that $9,500 should have been excluded. And there was no overpayment because Daniel did not exceed the $2,000 resource limit, right? At the first of the month. That never happened. So here, Social Security is in the wrong. So an appeal would be appropriate here. So you would submit or file a request for reconsideration because the suspension and the overpayment was incorrect. Good job, everybody. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So how do you apply for SSI? Fairly simple. You can go in person to the local Social Security office. You can also call. They have a 1-800 number and conduct the application by phone or request that the application be mailed. And you can also apply online. And here we have a link to that where you can apply online. We can go to the next slide. Here we have a few resources, right? And that are very helpful. And again, everybody will have access to a copy of this presentation. It will be provided to you. So you can take a look at all these links in your own time. Can go to the next slide. Okay, and lastly, right, maybe many of you may have been aware, right, but we have an intake line where people can call if they have a disability-related issue. Like Lonnie mentioned, right, there's very areas of disability law that we can help with the exception of that list that was on the second slide, I believe. But you can call our intake line. We're open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Or if you want to contact us after hours, we have an online form that you can fill out And that'll be, of course, sent to our advocates at our team, within our team, right? That will do the intake. Okay. And I think we can stop the recording because I think we'll now take a moment to answer questions.